Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name's Dom Robinson. Welcome to the September 2020 edition of Streaming Media Advanced Forum. It's our fourth birthday. I can't believe it. I'm feeling a bit grey and old here. It's quite strange. I certainly look older. Tim, you look younger than ever. Tim, are you out there?
I am out here, Dom, and it's funny it being our fourth birthday, and of course me marrying somebody with the last name of four. So I guess it's all supposed to work together like that. So you went on holiday for a little bit. You did the typical go away in August thing, right?
I did, yeah. I got sick. I spent something like 8 months in the house. Fortunately, we've got a garden, but I spent about 8 months in the house. I needed a change of scenery. The wife actually managed to jump on a tunnel and disappear. Jump in the car and disappear through the tunnel over to Paris for 4 days, which I thought was quite adventurous of her, and gave me about a week to finish up a variety of things here. And then when she got back, we decided to go and spend 3 4 days over in Wales, which was nice. Took the drone, did some flying, got some rain in because that's what you need as a Brit, and then managed to get back here at the end of last week and had a nice relaxing week. And we're just in the process of putting our kids in hazmat suits and sending them back to their schools at the moment. So
I was going to ask about that. So how is that situation over there? Here, our two little girls are actually in school, but Michelle, as a teacher, goes to her school and virtually connects to students who can't come to school. So how's the model working
I will.
in
To be honest, I'm going to find out tomorrow. The we got my two kids. One's in state education, one's in private, and it's markedly different. The experience they're having. My boy is getting photocopies sent to him and asked to sort of muddle his way through them with mum on a sort of unassisted basis, where I was absolutely staggered, and this is actually directly relevant to SMAF. My daughter was within a week totally immersed into the Google Classroom environment, and after a term and a half of that, we got an end of term report at the end of their summer term. This was staggering. The school alone had delivered 62,000 individual streaming classes in the space of a term and a half across their whole teaching community. Which, given our company takes a great pride in delivering over 100,000 financial and sporting events to the internet, just one secondary school delivering 62,000 live events felt a little close to comfort, to be honest. Yeah, it's been kind of school as usual for the older one, but the younger one has been needing some help, and I think it's going to be a good thing that he gets back to some sort of routine over the next few weeks. I hope, at least.
and here stateside, it's sort of staggered as to different parts of the country go back to school at different times. So here in the South, everyone went back at the beginning of August, mid-August. Zoom crashed spectacularly across the number of the school districts locally here. But after Labor Day, which is next Monday, in the north and out west, people will go back to school. So it seems like what's happening for the companies who deliver, like Zoom, like Google Meet, Google Classroom, that they're getting the chance to at least sort of stage and build up to scale in the States. So
Yeah,
anyway,
it certainly continues to be interesting times. That much is sure. I have an immediate feeling that just a gut feeling that I think we might well head back into lockdowns by the middle of the term. To be honest, but I think that's just because it's been a warm summer and everyone's had the windows open. But September the 1st came, and I would swing a camera around if I could, but it's just immediately gone grey and rainy here again. So all the windows are shut, and that doesn't bode well to me. But anyway.
typical British. Anupama, tell us a little bit about yourself and actually where are you in the world these days?
Yeah, I am actually in Pleasanton, California. A little bit, well, very much part of the valley, Silicon Valley, but a little bit on the border, I would say. And
You can get
Intera
the
is.
part, but it takes a little while, right?
Sorry?
I said you can get there on BART through Dublin, but it takes a little while.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, well, that way, yes, we are well connected with via BART to various places. Yeah, and thankfully, I mean, it looks like I mean, we had, as you know, a lot of fires here, and all the small ones seem to be contained more or less. The large ones, I think they are under control as well. So for a while, it was a bit scary.
Yeah, my friends in Menlo Park had told me that they really didn't want to go outside because the outside air was really bad. Was it the same up in the Pleasanton area?
It was I guess bad, not terrible or anything. Yeah.
So what's the company that you work for, and what's your focus in the industry?
Okay, so yeah, so my name is Anupama Anantharaman. I am responsible for all the products in the digital media product division. The Intera is headquartered here in Silicon Valley in Cupertino, and we provide content QC monitoring and kind of deep dive analysis solutions for the media industry. Mainly, I would say broadcasters, the telcos, all video aggregators, pros, production houses. And so our products are mainly used for quality, to assure quality and compliance across various points in the media chain, right from your ingest all the way to the final delivery. And yeah, lately, I guess we've also been very busy building some machine learning based tools to solve some critical problems that industry has been facing. I would say captions, then lip sync, classification of content, etc. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm doing. And apart from that, I'm also missing not attending trade shows, missing business travel, meeting my customers.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that topic here in a couple minutes. When you mentioned the company that you work for, it reminds me years ago I worked with a company called Thierry, which did cherry printer, cherry picker, which is sort of the early days of that back in the cable space. So
yes, right. Yeah, they were. I think they were able to do all these ad insertions and all that, some cool stuff. In the compressed domain. Yeah.
Exactly. So Thierry, you're not too far away from where Anupama is, but you're down in the valley proper, right?
Yes, so I am the heart of Silicon Valley, San Jose, California, in the middle of the COVID, the wildfire, and the PG&E shutdown. So we have all the plagues in California, and my server.
Yeah, so just be careful because locusts, other parts of the world, not California yet. So.
Yes, no, it's a bit difficult those days. Just as an anecdote, my server, 8K server, cannot restart because we don't have enough budget, power budget. PG&E is busy with the fire, which of course is more important. So, to make it short, California, as you see in my background, is a very bright sunshine most of the time, but we have some challenges. A lot of people working from home. Of course, I came to my office today because Dom tell me, hey, you need to be in a very nice environment, no kids crying. So anyway, it's an interesting time. Harmonic, for those who don't know, is the leader of video delivery, and we have more recently made some breakthrough on the cable, the CCAP architecture for DOCSIS 3, a lot of big announcements. We also have made a very interesting news in the newspaper. We got a massive order for the bandwidth reclamation on the 5G, which is going to use the C-band. And basically, that's one of the use of compression. You used to send MPEG-2 to the end cable head end, and now you send them MPEG-4. Guess what? You shrink by factor 2 the bandwidth. Therefore, you can give that to the 5G guys. So it's win-win. Everybody's happy. So that's the type of transformation I think we see more and more in our industry, where people are start to rethink how to share the pie how to bring more application in an existing infrastructure. You can't scale the spectrum. It's a finite, and that's where we believe in Harmonic we can help the industry. I give you two examples of what we are doing those days. Big topic, obviously, cloud, OTT, how to bring new service. And fortunately, COVID has opened the eyes of many operators who were not really convinced about what cloud can do. They now understand you don't need to move anybody. You just need to give IP address and links in order to bring the service to the public cloud. So public cloud, I think, has a big boost with the COVID, and we are quite happy to participate in that new era, I would say.
We'll come back to the cloud topic in a minute, but now since you mentioned 5G, let's talk a little bit about the reallocation auction. You're obviously probably familiar with that. Intelsat, some of the others giving up a portion of their C-band. It seems like there was initial conversation at the beginning of the year about ways to accelerate that. Then it, of course, slowed down because the FCC wanted to do an auction. Realistically, when do we as an industry expect that that will be, reallocated and ready for use for some of these new codecs?
So I think it was important first that the government gave the rule how this would happen. Then the satellite guys, of course, were fighting, saying we don't give our bandwidth for free. Then they found a technical solution to the problem. And I would say now it's a matter of implementing that nationwide. As you know, it's going to take time. You don't move boxes like this easily. You need to install, you need to deploy. I mean, it's a massive project, as you know, a lot of cable headends to feed. I would say probably this is going to happen in the course of 2021. So I would not be surprised to see some announcement of operator reclaiming that bandwidth in 2021. But you don't know how fast it's going to go because of the COVID. So I think it's a good subject, and I think what is funny is that a lot of satellite operator around the world contacted us, say, how you guys do this? Is it something I could also do myself? Can I get money for my spectrum? So this is an interesting perspective because it's an eye opener. It's a way to handle in a pragmatic way the problem of spectrum.
So
and what's fast,
Tim, just to chip in there, actually, there was an announcement I pushed through onto the SMAF newsfeed just a couple of hours ago that the UK's just announced clearance of 700 megahertz for 5G reuse. I mean, it's a bit of a token announcement because it's probably more useful on TV, analog TV distribution than it is at 5G frequencies, 700 megahertz. It's way low bandwidth. It's one of the problems with 5G I'm seeing at the moment is all of the hype is all up in all of the hyped benefits for speed and so on can only be gained really up at very ultra high frequency ranges, which are still tightly locked down for generally military and astrophysics uses. So we're not really going to see any benefits from 5G for a good decade, in my opinion. I think there's so much mis-selling of 5G, in my opinion. But to the point, it is starting to shift. So yeah.
And I would say, stateside here, Dom, of course, band 13, 700 megahertz, what Verizon uses for LTE. So at least if nothing else, what you may find with 700 megahertz there is it may also get some 4G benefit as opposed to 5G.
I just wish I always harp on about this, but I wish the industry would spend more time investing in wider ubiquity of 4G than bothering with 5G. It's great for machine to machine, but it's going to bring the consumer no benefits whatsoever.
It's kind of like the conversations 3.5, 4 years ago where everybody wanted to go to HEVC, and it turned out we could make AVC quite a bit better with some content or context-aware encoding and that type of thing. So,
Tim, you got it right.
And I know we're gonna have that conversation in a little bit. But what I find fascinating, Thierry, with the whole reallocation is, Intelsat took the approach of, as you were saying, the satellite guys didn't want to give up the bandwidth. Turns out it wasn't their bandwidth to give up; it was their license. So once that licensing issue is dealt with. As you say, we have the technical workaround. I just find it fascinating that Intelsat went the bankruptcy route to sort of slow it down, but then magically 2 days ago announced that they're buying GoGo, which is the in-flight data, which is also hurting desperately right now because there aren't a whole lot of people using Wi-Fi, on airplanes because they're not on airplanes. So
yeah, no, it's a very interesting times, and you get the similar situation in the cable market where the cable operators are trying to pack their QAM channels for video in order to open some DOCSIS 3.1 channel for data. And compression for them is also a good way to pack the legacy business, which is still big, but still not growing as fast as broadband. So we see this shift of, yes, we have a spectrum, but we should think in a smarter way how to reallocate our spectrum.
Interesting. So Dom, speaking of licensing, you wanted to talk about the topic of music rights. Give us sort of your thoughts. I know Eric sends his regards and can't be here today, but I'm sure this would have been a conversation you and he would have had around music rights. So you'll have to carry sort of both sides of the argument.
Yeah, so basically, actually, what spurred me to bring it up today was somebody produced. I'm going from memory here, and my memory is always rubbish. But somebody produced a chart of the main YouTube's takedowns has doubled over lockdown. The number of takedowns of video that they've been doing has doubled over lockdown. Now it's partly because they're hedging on the side of not offending people. So there's quite a lot of fake news. There's quite a lot of false information being shared. So that's increased the amount of takedowns that have been going on. What I found very interesting was on the chart, music copyright infringement didn't feature, where actually I know for a fact that most people who are publishing stuff to YouTube generally have problems with copyright music that they've included in a video. So I don't know whether they simply didn't include that statistic because it's a different, it didn't match what the chart was. But I had, we, as you know, I run a sort of hobby internet radio station, and I actually ended up getting a takedown notice from the RIAA, even though I was legitimately streaming. It turned out that somebody had deep linked into a geo-blocked iTunes file, deep linked into an iTunes podcast feed, which we share, had found a stream which was actually, the feed itself was geo-blocked, the metadata feed was geo-blocked, but they'd found the MP3 in that, and then they'd gone to the server and downloaded it in the States, and it had prompted a takedown, an automated takedown notice. Interestingly, because I ran a flag up the flagpole, I ended up talking quite quickly to the chief information officer, the head of the RIAA, basically, who was very supportive, understood that I knew about geo-blocking, we were trying to be compliant, and so on and so forth. So they were very cool. Amazon, who had forwarded the takedown notice, giving us 24 hours, and so on and so forth. So it was all very cool. It all sort of blew over quite quickly once we got the geo-blocking on the individual files sorted out. What was interesting was I then got another one last week, and the geo-blocking system I was using as a secondary as a secondary stage had been bypassed again. So while I'm used to pirates hacking DRM to illegally reshare content, I'm not used to rights holders hacking into servers to get hold of content and then complaining that it's being illegally shared when we're fighting to be compliant. So it was interesting that there's more.
Kind of great testing. You're right, because they're paying a lot of pen testers to actually do precisely what you're describing.
Well, I mean, the anecdote, the story, my story aside, what's interesting is there is clearly proactive, after talking to the RIAA, there are proactive agencies who are going out looking for this copyright content and informing the rights holders, who then forward the takedown notice to the RIAA, who pretty much automatically forward it to the takedown owners. And what I find interesting is there is a sudden surge of interest, which has largely been caused by bedroom DJs coming online during lockdown. So where we used to have, in fact, at the beginning of lockdown, we had really significant audiences. Now we're seeing tons and tons and tons of people coming live online, particularly on Mixcloud and Play DJ, two platforms which have launched over lockdown and really gone for it. I don't believe those platforms have got their rights sorted out, and I think they're I think they're test cases being funded by VCs to try to do kind of what Napster's done over the last 20 years, which is test the cases, try and find a niche within that model, and then once the VC's been burnt on the legal battles, but they know where they stand, then they can go on to, as Napster did, sell for 70 million and with a viable legal model. So I think the rights, the lockdowns and the sort of recent period of time has really shaken the market up, and I think that music rights are going to, as an issue, are going to be quite high-profile topics over the next 12 months, because at the moment it is virtually impossible to share podcasts with music in the US. In the UK, I can spend 180 quid and get a license to share over here. Similarly, in Europe, there are schemes that have come together, which mean that you can pay quite a nominal fee, and as a small independent provider, you can launch a niche podcast and you can use music. But it does seem that in the States, the rights holders are doing everything they possibly can to prevent audiences listening to the music, which is counterintuitive to me. So I think it's an interesting space, which again is ripe for a bit of a shake-up. It is a bit of a shame Eric's not here, because I think I'm talking on my own in this corner today. So
let me just open it up. Thierry, Anupama, any sort of sense of changes in the industry from a music rights standpoint?
So I'm a music fan, and I see more and more live streaming as a replacement of brick and mortar type of concerts. And I think we just seen the tip of the iceberg. We'll see more and more streaming. And like for the conference, you have maybe 10,000 people in a venue and 10 millions outside. Maybe you can connect those millions of people to this new experience.
Anupama?
I do listen to music a lot, but not much into concerts with large crowds. So
have you had any issues with being able to listen to content that you like because of takedown notices? I know Dom mentioned what he was saying, and I found when I worked with houses of worship that they're actually getting takedown notices for things that they legally have licenses to play. Have you noticed that with any of the content that you listen to?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of a watch this space at the moment. I think lockdown's intensified the activity online. People aren't, lots of musicians simply can't perform at the moment, so they're trying to get out online and use platforms like Facebook Live, YouTube Live, without realizing they can't even play their own music without some racketeering rights society turning around and saying you've got to pay us a fee. And YouTube and Facebook really are the hot targets. Mixcloud is putting its head above the parapet, and it's such a shame. 25 years after I got involved with MP3.com and live streaming online and so on, 25 years later, that industry still thinks that it can. I think it still thinks it can revert everything into a sort of monopoly royalty business, which I think it's crippling, and I think it's doing the musicians no justice, if I'm honest. But.
Well, and working on this algorithm article series, and actually that may be a great topic for next year for me to pitch to Eric for the editorial calendar, because I find the algorithms are fairly limited. I mean, they know how to do a music genome. That's one thing, but they don't know how to apply, the applicable environment for it. So I mentioned houses of worship. One of the things that I find fascinating was the way that during the early part of the lockdown up through Easter here in the States, the way that it was dealt with was a number of the CCLI and some of the other sort of religious licensing groups just said, we're going to give everybody free access through Easter. Well, that was great for that first period of time, because then, you could tell YouTube and Facebook to turn off the algorithm for particular music. Now that we're back in the licensing model, it's becoming an issue where if a band performs something close enough to the recording, in other words, they get so good that it sounds like the recording, those kinds of takedowns are also happening. So I agree. It's a topic that almost seems evergreen. You talked to our RIAA this year. Eric and I talked to Sound Exchange, which is a division of that, 5 or 6 years ago. And after we wrote a article, got sort of a cease and desist letter. So it's
really. Oh, they're one
oh
of my
yes,
they're one of my pet enemies.
We'll have to share that at some point. So anyway, different topic. Anupama, you mentioned machine learning. Let's talk a little bit about computer vision, machine learning, and those kinds of things, and where you see that in both the streaming space and also in the broadcast space.
So I mean, there is just now so much content, right? And what we are seeing is that customers, all these big media companies are struggling to, figure out how to classify this content based on their specific criteria. So I think this traditional TV was all about, I think, information and entertainment, but OTT is all about, streaming is all about information, entertainment, but also this experience, customized experience, targeted ads, monetization, and all that. So at least I think in the media space, we will see a lot of companies offering technologies. I would actually say algorithms, to these media companies. So when they are providing content to all over the world, they can be ready with the content. And what I mean by that is, as they say, the entire world is your audience, right? I've heard that, and that's true. So that means you have regional rules and regulations. Some type of content cannot be played in certain parts of the world and things like that. So how do you classify these huge content libraries based on adult content or some violent scenes? And so all this object class, detection, all that I think will, I think this 2020 has been a year that has given boost to companies that develop this sort of applications.
So recommendation engines and suggestion engines have been around for a while, but of course those are sort of manual metadata that people would type in to describe the content. What I hear you saying is that we're going beyond that to the computer watching the content to figure out what type of content it is.
Right. What I mean is that obviously there is so much content and not enough people to verify things for you. So, and even if you have, I think, human resources at your disposal, it's just not really very efficient. So, media companies that are involved in providing news, entertainment, providing customized experience and all that will need a way to to very quickly figure out how to prepare content based on all these different criterias. So and I think media companies, and I think this is important, the media companies probably will not be able to deal with this on their own. They will probably go to companies that are developing they have trained models really well, that are developing these types of technologies, because I don't think media companies can say, okay, here is a product. I mean, Google and Microsoft, they all have they all have products available, but they are not something that you can use out of the box. So you will you will need customization. You need media, tool providers to understand the content that media companies use, the compression formats, and many other things. So they will definitely rely on the small companies to provide that for them.
Anupama, are the tools as they're emerging at the moment, are they going beyond just image recognition and if you like, speech to text recognition? Are they actually getting into the analysis of the meaning of the content? So, for example, if somebody's looking for discussions about music piracy, are they going to discover this month's edition of SMAF through content analysis? Are we at that stage yet, or are we still looking for charts that are showing graphs about it within the image and so on? Where have we got to?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there you can create huge, these huge libraries with words, and that, so it's very sort of, context aware recognition. So you can quickly, tell files have, these types of words. This is how you recognize the patterns, and then provide you, ways to classify. Yes, we are seeing applications that provide that capability, and I think we'll see more and more of that. Initially, it might, the accuracy might not be very high, but I think over a period of time, you will see that we will begin to completely rely on those.
And Dom, I think there's an interesting trend toward genre analysis. So is it an exterior shot? Is it a two-shot of exterior? Is it set up like a comedic shot? Those kinds of things are starting to emerge too. So it is the actual computer vision understanding, I see two people in this scene and it's outside, so I'm going to tag the metadata for this particular scene or shot as such.
I guess I'm wondering if in an important election year in the States in particular, if we're getting to the point where we can automate isolation of news which is just nonsense, and separating out stuff that shouldn't be being redistributed and putting that into check this admin bin, or whether we're still relying on humans to flag content.
Right. Also, to be able to detect highlights from a sporting event, that's something that's talked about quite a bit. A lot of our customers request that kind of detection as well.
Yeah, when the whistle goes off, etc.
Yeah.
Now, Dom, I don't know, KQED is the radio station out there for Anupama and Thierry both. I don't think you're suggesting turning that off to keep them from getting, but what you're essentially saying is, could we tag content as being sort of further left or further right? That's an interesting, I would suggest there would probably be some algorithms that have started to look at that. Thierry, what's your take on this whole machine learning recommendations and metadata?
Yeah. So I will probably talk more about the data plane, because we are mostly focused on data plane in Harmonic. So what we have seen in the last 2 to 3 years is more usage of AI techniques in order to improve the compression. So this is something we can today deliver, and the content-aware encoding is the first incarnation. I'm watching the content and I'm looking at the complexity, and I'm learning from an AI machine to tell me where to put the bits, where and why. So that's something which is a bit behind us. Now, what we see is in order to reach more functionalities at the same capacity footprint on the server, customers are telling us, if you want to bring innovation, it should not be more complex than what I have installed today. Meaning they are conscious of the footprint, the carbon footprint. They don't want to install new system. So what we found very interesting and appealing with AI is that you can bring new algorithm that you could never make work in the traditional way in a lower footprint. I'll give you one example we have been demonstrating for the last year is the variable frame rate. If you know in broadcast, people tell you it's P50 or P60, and you cannot touch the frame rate because you are going to do damages to the content. And what we discovered is that using AI techniques, we could reduce the frame rate based on the contents. So we need to be very smart and to slow down the frame rate when there is no action and to increase the frame rate when there's more action. And using that type of technique with AI, we could reduce the capacity, the processing capacity by, let's say, about 30%. So customers like the fact that you don't degrade the experience, you can reduce the footprint of the servers, and of course, you do that in a systematic way, meaning that you do not have to do any check, any manual intervention. It's much more reliable than the classical approach.
And is that for on-demand content or also for live?
Tim, you are starting to offend me. This is for live, of course.
Okay.
This is for live.
And
And
the reason I asked that is I remember a demonstration a couple of years ago. I think it was with the MXF format. Matt Smith showed something from a US Open, and it would have been ideal to speed up the frame rate at certain points, especially when the camera panned versus when the camera was just sitting static, because as the camera panned and it stayed at a constant frame rate, you lost the faces of the people in the crowd.
correct. Yep.
But half the time what you had was a shot of, one of the Williams sisters just standing there getting ready to hit the ball. So this is the kind of model you're talking about.
Yes, but only AI supports this type of algorithm. You can research. Nobody has commercially deployed a viable frame rate in the broadcast world just because it didn't work. Or if it have to work, you say to the customer, give me 3, 4, 5 times server capacity. And the customer tells you, why do I need to spend this amount of money? It should be a simple features in harmonic encoder. So that's an example of solving real life problem with new technologies that is not possible with existing technology.
And that's a much more complex model than when I came out of film, where we had to do 3-2 pull down and you just stripped out the third one. What you're describing is literally essentially removing frames that somebody might not necessarily ever perceive were there.
Correct. It's based on the human model. So you develop a human model, you teach the model based on the tens of thousands of video sequence, and at the end the model is getting very accurate, and therefore you can skip frames. And guess what, the beauty of this is it works with existing set-top box and device because it's compliant with the MPEG syntax. We don't do any tricks.
Interesting. Let's talk for a minute about codec innovation. I know that's something that we all seem to come back to, at least from the streaming media standpoint, in writing every year and a half to 2 years. You live that every day. Where are you seeing innovations? Obviously, we've got AV1, which is claiming that it's speeding up to close to real time, but then we've got EVC, VVC, and some of these others.
Yes. So I'm going to give you the full nuts. So you
He
have
rubs his
AV1.
hands. You've given him the
So
ball.
AV1. I'm going to count. I'm going to count, guys.
this
I'm going to make interactive. So you have AV1 from the AOM people. You have VVC, which has been pushed by MPEG as also the Media Coding Industry Forum. You have EVC, which is the ersatz, the simpler, easier to deploy, simpler licensing terms, hopefully. You have LCEVC, which is an add-on to any existing codec. And then you should not close your eyes because you have the Chinese with AVS2 and AVS3 also telling you we have great technology, please come to us, we'll give you a good deal. So as a service provider, you need to ask yourself, okay, which one is going to win the race and which one should I bet on? So we are at this position right now. AV1 definitely, I would say HEVC is the default incumbent in terms of codec deployed. If you look at the blog we made recently, I think I counted more than 8 billion device HEVC enabled, meaning not deployed commercially for HEVC. Then AV1 with a lot of claims and a lot of good godfathers, all the GAFAs are behind it. That's great. Still zero device to support it today, meaning you probably will see this as a commercial reality in 2 to 3 years from now. And then MPEG trying to bring new codecs, and therefore you will see in 2022, 2023 much more choice than we have today, and hopefully we will get a better way to implement better compression than we have today with HEVC. As you know, HEVC is still a challenge on the licensing side. AV1, why not? But what we hear from the market is, especially in the world of the broadcast and operators, they tell you, I don't want to change my set-top box if you bring me a codec which doesn't improve the performance. So it could be different conversation with the bring your own device, like TVs and Roku's who have AV1, but I don't see much traction right now from the operator side. So it will be more for the Google, the Amazon, and the likes who are probably going to push AV1, but operators still sticking to HEVC and question mark for the next generation codec. All the bets are off, as you would say in English. I do not give my personal bet because I have to be careful. I might be burnt. It's like the election, which candidate is going to win in November. It's maybe too premature to give an answer. But yes, a lot of choice. And I don't like the multi-codec word, because if I say to my customer, you need to have all the options on the encoder and decoder side, it's not really helping them. So we're really trying to help operators to figure out what to do. And the good news is the business discussion are coming at the same level as the technical discussion. We will not accept a codec without terms and conditions in the industry. We made the mistake one with HEVC. We are going to be very cautious on the next generation codec.
And as you're talking about sort of the business decisions and the technical decisions, it reminds me, you've been in the industry long enough to remember back when we went from MPEG 2 to MPEG 4 Part 2.
Yes.
And that didn't really take off like it was supposed to. And part of it was it wasn't much more efficient. I mean, it was 10 to 15% more efficient. The second reason, though, was a very strategic business decision. Amortizing the MPEG-2 transport stream delivery equipment from the bean counter standpoint, it had only been 2 years, and Microsoft was trying to force the industry to change after 2 years. As AVC came along, ultimately, it had been enough years between, and B, it had much better efficiency. Yep. So what I hear you saying is we're almost looking at sort of a similar model here. I've got an infrastructure in place. If you can give me a codec that fits within that and gives me better efficiency, I'll have a conversation with you. If you ask me to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, it's a non-starter.
Correct. And if you recall, Tim, SD MPEG-2, HD AVC, UHD HEVC. Now, if you tell me 8K is going to save VVC, I will tell you good luck with that. Maybe more immersive media, maybe more next generation immersive experience. But I think the next generation codec are going to be challenged in the sense that we need to find an application for those new codecs.
Yeah.
And reducing the cost at no bandwidth, the licensing cost at no bandwidth gain, I don't think this is a very compelling offering.
I think we're seeing diminishing returns in investment in codec, and I think that's going to be over a 10-year stripe. I think we're going to see people really questioning whether, AV1 must have cost an enormous amount to develop, and there's still uncertainty on the patent pool. There's still uncertainty on the royalties on it, and there's still uncertainty on the benefits of it. So I just beggars belief. It's certainly not a game I would. I'm very happy taking whatever codec our clients want us to implement and making it highly available and highly scalable. That's our business. I'd never ever get involved in the codec game. It just seems to be diminishing returns in the extreme at the moment. And
with these new codecs, yes, they offer better efficiency, but industry going towards all software-based solutions. And if you want to run these on the cloud, I mean, I think it's very, very expensive. So I think that's going to be a very big consideration as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was only today that Intel brought, today, I don't know, this week anyway, Intel's finally announced support for AV1 in their chipsets and so on. It's not even clear from the press report whether it's just decode only or encode as well.
Decode, yeah.
It's just decode.
Decode, yeah.
I don't know a gamer who's going to go rushing out and buy that chipset because I just can't see what difference it's going to make to the gamer.
Not much.
Well, the only difference it'll make is if Twitch forces them to go watch stuff in AV1.
So
then
it's largely affecting big conglomerates who've got a license fee, and I'm just reading the MPEG-LA spat with the MCIF at the moment. It all seems to be benefiting lawyers and legal firms, but really, it's not. I don't know. I think we do. It's like the 5G and 4G thing. I think there's still so many substantial problems with the deployment of HEVC well. I wish we'd finish these things and do them really well, because that would encourage better growth, better adoption, in my opinion. We've had a comment in from Mark here. Hold on a sec. I'm going to stick it on the stream. We've got this. You can't see this on the Zoom call, so I'm going to read it out to you. But Mark is tuned in. Codec war is a never-ending one, I'm afraid. There will always be stakeholders in the game wanting to stir the pot and benefit from it. It will never disappear. I have to agree with Mark there, I think.
But Dom, in all fairness, I think Dom, in all fairness, we are getting smarter. We learn from our HEVC lesson. We cannot let the door open to all the licensors. We have AV1 as a countermeasure to HEVC, I would say arrogance, if maybe it's not the right term. And then we have MCIF trying to control the licensing of VVC. So before we were naive, then we get to a phase where we realize we were naive, and now we're trying to fix our naiveness. So we are less naive, and we're asking tougher questions.
And yet, what's fascinating there, if you go back and look at I remember the article I wrote around H.264's licensing Labyrinth, is what we called that years ago, because with ABC, there was that licensing issue as well. VP8 was essentially the sacrificial lamb to get MPEG to, have the conversation around dropping licensing or kicking it down the road a couple of years. We didn't learn it, obviously, then, because HEVC, we had the same problem, and AV1 may become the sacrificial lamb against HEVC to get the licensing kicked down the road a couple of years. And yet AV1 fundamentally has a really nice licensing model if we could get it adopted on some of these newer codecs. Do you expect that we really have learned the lesson, or do we just forget it every 7 to 10 years and then suddenly we get reminded as to why we had those licensing wars?
I think it's good. I think I'm very happy we have the choice now, HEVC or AV1, although AV1 has its own challenge. And I believe the industry is not passively waiting on VVC. It's organizing itself in order to control the chaos. That's what I would say, is to have something which is more under control. It's like, if you remember, George Bush said the financial system will regulate by himself in 2006 or 7. We know it doesn't work. The people cannot agree. It's impossible. You need to control, you need to put some framework. And if you follow the news, Dom and Tim, you probably have seen the MPAI new initiative of Leonardo Clarigli, the previous MPEG chairman, who say, I'm going to put first the framework license upfront, to which you need to agree, and then we are going to develop the technology.
I'm interested to know. I mean, we help our clients do their codec licensing. but it took us about a year to and fro to help them understand. We do a lot of live streams, so a lot of our infrastructure is very ephemeral. Encoders spin up and spin down in 2 hours. It took about a year going backwards and forwards with the licensing authorities to even vaguely come up with a framework, and they kind of ended up going, do it by peak concurrency. And if your peak concurrency is 700, then we'll charge you for 700 encoding stations. And then you go into the licensing, having spent this time going backwards and forwards, you go into the licensing, and I can't remember the exact number, but it's something like you need to be actually selling 100,000 before you owe them a penny. So I'm not really sure that they're making any money out of this anyway. It just seems to be a lot of obstruction, a lot of paperwork, and I'm not sure where the costs are and where the returns are. There seems to be a lot of noise. I think there is this dream that one day somebody is going to own a codec which everybody is forced to use and pay them a penny for every minute of video that every consumer's watching, which is just a pure fantasy because, like MP3, it's a genie that's out of the bottle. It's not going to.
I worked for an encoding firm for about 6 months, and that was one of the issues. Their business model. I was the chief strategy officer that came in. Their business model was charge a penny for every minute of encoding. And I'm like, you're good, but you're not that good. I mean, if you could get it to a 75% compression, then sure, because then the bandwidth costs drop. But when you're talking 15 to 25%, there's no business model there for that.
But I'm a CDN pipes and wires guy, and actually, the cost of bandwidth is dropping far, far, far faster. It's just so you don't need compression at that rate. You just buy more fiber, or to the point, you light more fiber up. You've already got fiber, so it's.
So let's go to. I think Anupama makes a really good point though on the new codec. So I'm going to sort of take what you said, and I'm going to slightly re-say it and then come back to it. When I first started in the industry, I was with MPEG-1. MPEG-1 was hardware, and then magically MPEG-1 went software. But right about that time, MPEG-2 came out, and you had to have hardware. And we went along for a while, and then suddenly MPEG-2 was software, and you had H.264, and you needed hardware, etc. There is that natural trend that we've had in the industry where we start in hardware, we don't commit it to an ASIC, but we do it on general purpose processors or GPU. Then we get it to software. You brought up a really good point though, in the fact that if we're going cloud, what happens is your OpEx cost goes through the roof because you have to have a number of instances to encode something in real time, which sort of is the standard that we judge everything by. Thierry, I wanted to come back to that. Sort of you sit there in that intersection of hardware and software. Are we going to go through those waves again where as EVC and VVC come out, we're going to be forced to hardware solutions before some period of time, then it becomes general purpose processing?
Good question. So my company has made a choice many years ago to go software for any codec, including EVC, HEVC, VVC, next generation codec. So obviously the challenge we face is each time we move to a new codec, we change the resolution. So from HD to UHD, from UHD to 8K. So obviously VVC in 8K to do it in real time is a challenge. But if you tell me, hey, I want to do a 4K VVC, I think it's within limit of technology, and I do not know of any company who still has ambition to do a hardware-based encoder. Just to give you one example, because I know you guys like the news, you probably have read the VVC announcement of HHI saying we can do 40 megabits per second, 8K VVC. At the French Open last year, Harmonic was demonstrating live HEVC 8K encoding below 25 megabits per second. Why? We had a lot of cloud compute resource. We were using smart content-aware encoding techniques. And therefore, if you really control the infrastructure and you use it at its best, you can challenge the upcoming codecs with existing technology. So that's why cloud is your best friend if you use one codec. If you use 4 codecs, it's a different discussion.
Mm.
Anupama, I'm going to let you have the last word on this because I know cloud was one of your topics.
I mean, in general, I see cloud is touted to be more, cost efficient. I really am not sure about that. I think it's expensive. Of course, it depends on what application you are running, how long, etc. But it is true. I mean, it does give you that flexibility. I mean, if you're talking about scaling, then yes, it's a great way to scale easily. And if resources are available on demand, then that's very good news also. So I think companies would be willing to overlook this cost factor for some of these scalability benefits, and the fact that somebody else is maintaining the infrastructure. Yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, I think
just to chip in there, I think we've been doing a lot of cloud for a decade and a bit now, and one of the things that I often try to get across to people with their infatuation with using cloud is actually the economic benefits of when you turn things off, not when you turn things on. So if you can't if you're doing lots of live and it's very sporadic, you can often make enormous savings over running 24/7 infrastructure. But if you're doing 24/7 infrastructure, it's rarely going to. It depends what your operating strategy is, but it's rarely going to be a benefit if you're doing 24/7 stuff. And I think that it's about turning stuff off when you're not using it, not turning it. Scaling down is really where the economic benefits of cloud are, but it's not something that communicates to people very well. They're always interested in this idea that a guy in a bedroom can run 100,000 servers around the world, and that's the wrong way to look at it in my mind. So.
Yeah, until he gets the bill for those 100,000 servers.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Anyway,
so
all right.
We got 5 minutes left, Tim. What are we going to hit for the last bit? We normally hit the events in the last sort of few minutes. So,
well, let's actually talk about events. This would normally be the weeks that we would all go to IBC, and obviously we're not going to IBC. Do we think that the industry, whether it's NAB, IBC, the streaming media shows, have reached a point where they've figured out how to do it online, or is the online sort of the stopgap until we can all go sit face to face? And I'd open that up to all three of you to sort of give feedback on.
Well, I don't think we are at a point where we can, say, yes, we can conduct our business online. We can communicate with our customers, tell them what they want to do. I think those tools are just not available. There are some companies that are offering that, but our experience has not been very good. Just to replicate that, that energy, that show, how easily you navigate different things, figure out what it is that you are interested to look at, that one-on-one communication. I think we are not there yet, and that's why companies are doing all these webinars and trying to get customers' attention.
I would agree.
Is it?
The serendipity factor to me is the factor that I can't get online, because if I'm wandering the hall and something catches my eye, I'll stop and ask some questions. I don't know what questions to ask if it's in the virtual space.
I'm reminded of when I'm reminded of a story when search engines first emerged. One of the benefits of search is if you want a piece of information, you can find it very, very quickly. You can pinpoint target it. But one of the things you lose, which historically people had from using libraries, was as you scroll along a shelf of books, you discover thousands and thousands of books about all sorts of other subjects, and your breadth of understanding through the serendipity of books sitting alongside the book which actually has the piece of information and is lost. And I think that's what we're losing at the moment.
And in fact, Dom, if you remember, the early Yahoo search engine essentially was you submitted a link to them and they put them in sort of categories like libraries, where Alta Vista and Google was your there's a blank bar and you have to come up with what you're going to look for. Sorry, Anupama, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was just going to add to what Tom was talking about, which is, yes, the serendipity factor. I think you just are just better informed when you actually attend a trade show, and that one-on-one communication, that, you know, the personal communication, it's very much, I mean, there is really no replacement for it.
Thierry?
Yes, no, I think it's an interesting times. Dom, can you share the amount of people you get online with your streaming conference versus?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the upsides was the content delivery summit, which Tim and Mark is listening in, and others help with. You know, traditionally that conference has had 60, 100 attendees. We had 450 turn up for the virtual event in June, and you know, and they were from all over the world. So that is a massive change, and I think that's really good. I think the sad thing about it was the fact that, and I was talking to one of the sponsors for the next one, which is coming up just shortly after the October edition of SMAF on October the 5th. One of the sad things is I don't think we've cracked the networking side. And for me, my favourite part of IBC is, and has been for 15 years, is 4:30 on the beach on Friday. That's the night I fall in canals. That's the night I make my friends. That's the most important bit of networking that happens in my annual diary, and that's not happening this year. And I don't think going and lying in a puddle outside my house is going to have quite the same effect. But you know,
I'll add another example. Dom mentioned that about, you know, CDS, and in fact, what we had to do with CDS was, because we had a certain number of people who could come into the Zoom, we had to then shove the others off to a YouTube Live. My wife and I just bought a farm, and as we're going through and learning the process, we wanted to attend a virtual event on apiaries, so beekeeping. It turned out they would normally have about 12 people who would show up to this in person. They had 700 people show up. They didn't understand what would happen when they went over that 100 attendee cap on Zoom, so I had to help them set up the YouTube channel. But the point is, either people are bored and they want to just tune into these things and it's easy to tune in, or we really are reaching that point where you can learn on demand from live events like this. And I'm not sure which of those we're at. Thierry, what's your sort of take on that?
Yeah, I think people always have appetite for accessing information. And for me, the internet streaming, being webinar, being Zoom, is the way to make the information available at the fingertip. It's much more democratic today than it was before. Everybody is on Zoom, everybody's on webinar. And at the end, the information exchange for me is the more important. Okay, your paper has been accepted. Now you can make it available. You can stream it. You have 10 times more people reading the paper. For me, as a producer of content, that's really the end goal, to reach people.
Very good. Thank you very much for your time, Thierry. Thank you, Anupama, for joining us. Dom, any final closing words?
Just to say, I'm looking for speakers, panelists, and so on for Content Delivery Summit on October the 5th. So do ping me through info at SM Advanced Forum or dom at id3as.com if you'd like to get involved in those. It's been brilliant as always having these monthly chats. Thierry and Pama, thank you so much for coming on, and thanks to those of you that have contributed a few humorous comments in the chat that I've both posted and ignored. As always, it's always good. But we will be back on, let me just check the date. We're going to be back on October the 1st with Nick Kremensky and Tanaga, or on Thursday, October the 1st. So looking forward to that. Thanks once again. And let me just see if I can get everyone titled up and looking good. So there's Anupama, thank you very much. Let's get you up there with your titles. And I've got to do this manually, so excuse me talking while I do it. Thierry, brilliant to see you as always. Sorry not to be sinking some beers with both of you at IBC this year, but I'm sure we'll be able to do that very soon. Tim, as always, you're sinking beer already, or probably not in your case, it's tea or something. There we go. So I look forward to seeing you all next month, if not before. It's been great to see you. Cheers, mate.
Yeah.